She pressed her hand against her aching belly, feeling the baby shift as the late evening cold settled around the remote gas station. The neon sign flickered weakly, casting long shadows over cracked concrete. She watched her husband's luxury SUV pull away, its taillights disappearing into the dark highway like the last trace of warmth leaving her life. His words echoed in her mind. Sharp, dismissive, cruel. He had accused her of slowing him down, ruining his weekend plans, turning him into a caretaker instead of the untouchable millionaire he prided himself on being. She had begged him to wait, to consider the fact that she was 8 months pregnant and exhausted from the long trip. But he didn't care. He wanted a weekend at the resort, and she didn't fit into that picture. As his car vanished completely, silence swallowed her. The gas station attendant wasn't even inside the booth anymore, leaving her alone with nothing but the hum of a distant generator. She wrapped her arms around herself, struggling to stay calm. She knew stress was dangerous for the baby, but how could she not shake? Their marriage had started like a fairy tale, lavish trips, surprise gifts, sweet promises whispered late at night. But the more successful he became, the colder he grew. He started treating her like another asset he owned rather than a woman carrying his child. Tonight was the first time he let that darkness show so openly, abandoning her in a place where taxis didn't even drive by. A gust of wind pushed dust across her shoes, and she winced as a contraction tightened across her abdomen. It wasn't strong enough to be labor, she hoped, but it reminded her that she had little time to waste. She reached into her bag for her phone, praying it still had battery. The screen flickered to life, 4% remaining and barely any signal. Still, she tried calling him, but the call failed instantly. The second attempt went straight to voicemail. She felt anger rise inside her, not just at him but at herself, for believing his apologies, for excusing his moods, for thinking that a baby would soften him. She stared down the empty highway, wondering if anyone would even notice her if she collapsed right there. A creaking sound caught her attention. From the far end of the lot, an old pickup truck rolled closer. It was rusty, one headlight dim, rattling like it had seen decades of hard roads. She stepped back instinctively, unsure if she should trust anyone in such an isolated place. The truck stopped a few feet away, and an older man stepped out. His clothes were worn, his face weathered, but his eyes held genuine concern. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked gently. She tried to answer but her voice trembled too much. He noticed her belly immediately and his expression changed to alarm. "You shouldn't be standing out here alone. Where's your car?" She swallowed hard, mustering the courage to say the truth. "My husband left me." The man blinked, confused at first, then furious on her behalf. "Left you? In your condition?" She nodded, and tears finally spilled down her cheeks. The stranger shook his head, muttering something about irresponsible fools, before offering his jacket. She hesitated but allowed him to drape it over her shoulders. It smelled faintly of engine oil and pine trees, oddly comforting. "My name's Walter," he said. "I'm headed toward town. There's a small clinic there. Let me get you somewhere safe." She hesitated again, not because she distrusted him, but because she was ashamed. Her husband was a millionaire, a man who owned properties across the country, yet she stood there dependent on a stranger with a decades-old truck. Another contraction made her grip the truck's door for balance. Walter steadied her carefully, moving slowly so as not to startle her. "All right, that's it. You're getting in. No arguments," he said with gentle authority. She nodded weakly. Inside the truck smelled like old leather and dust, but it was warm. As Walter started the engine, he glanced at her. "You've got family." She shook her head. Her parents had passed away years ago, and her closest relative lived across the ocean. She had married her husband believing he would become her family, but instead, she had found herself more alone than ever. As they drove, the dim lights of the gas station faded behind them. The dark road ahead stretched endlessly, but at least she wasn't walking it alone anymore. Walter kept talking softly, explaining that he lived alone on a small ranch with a few horses. He made deliveries in town during evenings. "I've seen storms roll in this area without warning," he said. "You're lucky I stopped by." She shivered, realizing how dangerous her situation really had been. She tried calling her husband again, still no response. She checked her messages. None. Not even a single apology or explanation. Just silence. The truck bounced over a pothole and she flinched. Walter apologized immediately, driving slower. He really just left? He asked, still stunned. She nodded. He wanted to get to the resort before check-in, she said bitterly. He said I was ruining his mood. Walter's grip tightened around the steering wheel. A man like that shouldn't be trusted with a dog, let alone a family, he muttered. She didn't defend her husband this time. There was nothing left to defend. Her heart was too tired, too bruised by the indifference that had grown over months. She had held on to hope, but tonight had shattered it completely. The contractions started becoming more frequent, though still irregular. She breathed through them, trying not to panic. Walter noticed immediately. We're almost at the clinic. 10 minutes, he reassured. But she couldn't help imagining what would have happened if he hadn't found her. The thought made her chest tighten. Her child deserved better than a father who abandoned them before birth. She touched her belly, whispering, I'm not leaving you. Walter glanced at her, hearing the quiet vow, and gave a small nod of respect. She didn't know it yet, but the journey ahead would change everything, not just for her but for the child she carried. As they reached the outskirts of town, glowing lights spilled onto the road. Relief washed over her. Walter turned into the small clinic's parking lot, helping her out carefully. Inside, the nurses rushed toward her, guiding her into an exam room. Walter stayed near the door, giving her space but not leaving. For the first time that night, she felt safe. The doctor examined her and concluded she wasn't in labor yet but was under severe stress. You need rest, warmth, and ideally someone you trust with you, he said. She avoided his eyes, unsure how to explain her situation without falling apart again. After the exam, Walter approached her with a thermos of warm tea. You got somewhere to stay? He asked. She shook her head silently. The resort her husband drove to was more than an hour away, and even if she arrived there, he likely wouldn't open the door for her. Walter sighed deeply. All right then, you're coming home with me for tonight. My late wife would haunt me if I left you alone in some clinic chair. He smiled gently, and despite her exhaustion, she managed a small smile back. She never expected kindness from a stranger at her lowest moment. Walter's ranch house was simple but cozy. Warm lights glowed through the windows, and the scent of wood smoke lingered in the air. He helped her inside carefully, letting her settle on the couch while he prepared a blanket and a bowl of soup. You need strength, he said. She stared around the home. Family photos, well-kept furniture, a life built with care. It felt more genuine than anything she'd known in her mansion-like home with her husband. She ate slowly, feeling warmth spread through her chest as her baby kicked softly, reacting to the nourishment she finally received. Walter sat across from her, not prying, just keeping her company. Eventually she found herself telling him everything, how her husband had changed after making his first million, how he pressured her to keep appearances, how he blamed her for every inconvenience. Walter listened quietly, occasionally shaking his head. Money doesn't make a man, he finally said. How he treats people does. His words struck something deep within her. She had been blaming herself for too long, thinking she wasn't enough. But tonight proved otherwise. She wasn't the one at fault. As the night deepened, Walter prepared the guest room for her. The bed was soft, the blankets warm. She lay down with a sigh of relief. For the first time in months, she slept without fear or tension. Early morning sunlight filtered through the curtains when she woke, accompanied by the comforting aroma of breakfast. Walter greeted her with a cheerful, "Morning, Mama," making her laugh softly. She hadn't laughed in a long time. She realized she didn't want to return to the life she had before. But reality forced itself back when her phone buzzed. Finally, her husband had messaged. "Where are you? You made me look like a fool last night." No apology, no concern, no mention of the baby. She stared at the message, feeling something inside her break, not painfully, but cleanly, decisively. Walter noticed her expression. "Bad news?" he asked. She nodded. "Good," he said simply. "Means you know what to do next." She smiled sadly, appreciating his blunt honesty. She didn't know what her future looked like yet, but she knew it wouldn't include a man who left her at a gas station. Hours later, Walter drove her back to the clinic for another checkup. The doctor confirmed that she and the baby were fine but emphasized avoiding stress. "Surround yourself with people who care," he said firmly. As she walked back to the truck, she realized she already had someone who cared, someone who had no obligation but chose kindness anyway. The realization was overwhelming. Meanwhile, her husband arrived at the gas station, furious. He expected her waiting for him, apologizing, begging. Instead, he found nothing. Panic replaced anger. He called her repeatedly, but she ignored every call. She wasn't ready to speak to him, not until she found her strength fully. He drove back toward town, searching for her, the first flicker of fear entering his voice as he left long voicemails pretending to care. But she had heard these lies before. They no longer mattered. When he finally tracked her to the clinic, he barged inside demanding to see her. She refused. The staff supported her decision, keeping him away. He shouted that she was embarrassing him, ruining his reputation. Those words, reputation, cut through the air like razor blades. That was all he cared about. Not her, not their child, just his image. She felt a fire rise inside her, stronger than any fear she'd carried. She stepped into the hallway, facing him with calm resolve. "You left me," she said. "And our baby. You made a choice last night. Now I'm making mine." He tried to grab her arm but Walter appeared between them like a wall of protection. Her husband scoffed. "Who is this old man?" Walter replied simply, "Someone who knows how to treat a lady better than you ever have." Her husband realized the situation was slipping from his control and attempted to sweet-talk her, but she didn't budge. She walked back into the room, closing the door behind her. Her legs trembled, but not from fear, this time from relief. The hold he once had over her was gone. Completely. She spent the next hours planning her next steps. Walter sat with her, telling her she deserved joy, peace, and safety. She believed him. That evening, her husband tried calling again, but she blocked his number. She contacted a lawyer instead, someone specialized in handling divorces involving high-net-worth spouses. She explained everything. Her abandonment, the emotional suffering, the risk he put on her and the baby. The lawyer told her she had a strong case. For the first time in a long while, she felt control return to her life. Walter offered to let her stay on the ranch as long as she needed. He said it kindly, without pity. "Just until you're steady on your feet," he added. She accepted, grateful beyond words. In the days that followed, she found peace in the ranch's quiet mornings, its gentle routines. She helped Walter feed the horses, washed dishes, and rested while listening to the wind whisper through the fields. Her baby kicked frequently now, reacting to her calm energy. One afternoon, a severe contraction hit her. This time it was unmistakable. Labor had begun. Walter didn't panic. He grabbed the hospital bag they had prepared days earlier and helped her into the truck. The drive felt long but she felt safe, trusting Walter more than she ever trusted her husband. At the hospital, nurses took her in immediately. Hours passed, filled with pain, fear, hope, and finally, joy. Her baby boy entered the world crying strong and loud. Tears streamed down her face as she held him, overwhelmed by love. Walter stood by the door, wiping his eyes discreetly. "He's perfect," he whispered. She smiled, whispering back, "He is." The doctor congratulated her, noting how resilient she had been throughout the pregnancy despite the emotional hardships. She knew she survived because of the stranger who became her guardian. Her husband tried to storm into the hospital again, demanding rights. The staff refused him access. The lawyer stepped in, ensuring legal protections were placed immediately. With evidence of abandonment, she secured full custody. Her husband's power crumbled the moment she chose herself and her child over his money. He tried to threaten court battles, but his reputation, the thing he cared most about, was already unraveling. Days later, she left the hospital with her newborn in her arms and Walter at her side. She returned to the ranch, where a room had already been prepared for the baby. Soft blankets covered the crib, and a small stuffed horse sat in the corner, a gift from Walter. She stood there, tears filling her eyes, overwhelmed by the kindness she had been shown when she expected none. She started rebuilding her life, slowly but confidently. She learned to breathe again, to smile without forcing it, to sleep without fear. Walter became a grandfather figure to her child, someone she could depend on. She often thought about the night she was abandoned, but instead of feeling pain, she felt gratitude. That moment had broken her, but it had also led her to safety, strength, and a future she never imagined. One quiet morning, holding her baby against her chest, she walked outside to the golden fields. The sun warmed her face and the air smelled of fresh earth. "We're home," she whispered to her son. She looked at Walter tending the horses, smiling softly. She knew she would never again allow herself to be treated as disposable. She had chosen a new life, a life built not on wealth or appearances, but on kindness, dignity, and love. And for the first time, she felt truly free.